The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So then there were two head coaching vacancies left. I told you this was the deepest and most talented crop of coaches I've ever seen in one coaching cycle, and that some coaches were going to end up without a seat. That's not our problem, as long as we get the guy that we want. And it's looking pretty damn good for the good guys right now. The only team that I thought had a chance to snatch Ben Johnson away was the Carolina Panthers, if he was willing to chase the bread. And I can't fault a man for trying to change the fortunes of his family in one fell swoop. However, in this profession, you're usually going to go with the best opportunity, not the most lucrative opportunity, especially when the most lucrative opportunity comes with some strings attached. Generally speaking, you want to go where you think you're going to have the best chance to succeed, because if you succeed, the money will come. So I was never, ever wavering in my confidence as to whether we were going to get Ben Johnson or not. But now that there are only two positions available here in Seattle, and he's not going to Seattle, this is pretty much a done deal. And we've heard that for about a week now. Everybody's pretty much pointing at the Commanders as the landing destination for Ben Johnson. So where there's smoke, there's fire. For me, we're already at the cash register. We've got Benny J in the cart. We're about to put him on the belt. They're going to ring him up, and we're going to get out of there, right? Bag him, tag him. Let's get out of here, okay? But since we already know who the head coach is and presumably the offensive play caller, we still need a defensive coordinator. So tonight, my friends, we go defensive coordinator shopping, okay? We will go back into the store. You know how you get to the car and you start loading up your stuff and you say, oh, man, I forgot we need fill in the blank. So you head back into the store. That's what we're about to do. Got our head coach and our offensive coordinator or offensive play caller. Forgot the defensive coordinator. Let's go back inside and find one. So we're going to do that tonight. Now, we don't know ultimately what's going to happen there. And part of the problem in waiting for your head coach this late in the game is that you miss out on opportunities like a guy like Ryan Nielsen, for instance. Ex-defensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons, did a fantastic job with that Falcons defense this year. The Falcons should have been a playoff team. Their defense was good enough. Their offense had weapons. Simply put, the quarterback position stopped them from doing anything other than going home when the final regular season game hit zeros, right? So he gets hired in Jacksonville, does Ryan Nielsen. Vic Fangio comes available, but there was never, ever an opportunity for anybody else other than Philadelphia to even get with him. That's why he left Miami in the first place, was to go straight to Philadelphia. So that is what it is. When you wait for your head coach, because you can't make any moves staff-wise or else you'd be hustling backwards. We're not doing that anymore. Remember the days of hiring Jim Zorn as the offensive coordinator first and then going out and looking for the head coach? Remember days of doing stupid shit like that? Yeah, those days are over with, okay? We're doing things in the right order, okay? Which means you hire the head coach first, and then you let him go get whatever defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator or running backs coach, wide receiver coach, et cetera, he wants. That's how we're going to run our operation, like you should, like a smart organization should. So I can't be mad because we're waiting on our guy, but in doing that, there is a drawback to that. You get what's ever left in terms of these defensive coordinator candidates. I still contend that there's a chance, and we'll talk about this tonight, that he could just bring somebody with him from Detroit. And all of that speculation as to what he's going to do with offensive coordinator could be gone just like that. But we'll see. in any event, we'll get to our shopping. I've got a list. We'll go over that shopping list of defensive coordinators tonight. And then we'll see what happens, right? But I'm excited because our guy, Ben Johnson, he's coming here to Washington. And, you know, it's funny because Belichick's probably going to have to sit out a year, more likely than not. We'll see what happens with Mike Vrabel. He could end up in Seattle, but Vrabel could sit out a year. Maybe Vrabel says, hey, I'll be your defensive coordinator, not necessarily here. I wouldn't want Vrabel as my defensive coordinator because I know that the allure of being a head coach next year, he'd be gone just like that, right? I want a guy that I can have at least for 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Preferably, you'd love to get you one of the oldie but goodies that you know ain't going nowhere. But is it too old to where you're like, hey, he might only coach for another 3-4 years before he retires? Like a Steve Spagnuolo, for instance. Like, that's what you're looking for. Ideally, that's what you want, is one of those dudes that's just going to hang around and it ain't going nowhere, ain't going to be a coach again. And it's cool with being a defensive coordinator for the next 8 years. That's what you really like to have. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. I digress. Anyway, what I want to start off the show with first is yesterday, I put out a video. In that video, I asked you 2 questions. One of those questions was if Adam Peters, the new general manager of the Washington Commanders, came to you specifically and said, hey, you, Commanders fan. Yeah, you. We got all these free agents that are pending this year. You've watched this team. You've been a fan of this team. Which one of these guys, I'm only bringing back one. Which one of these guys do you suggest I bring back? So that was the question, right? Question 1. Question 2, Peters also comes to you and says, hey, you, Commanders fan. Yeah, you again. Hey, I'm looking around this roster. It needs a lot of work. But you've been watching this team. You saw the team last year. You know the roster back and front. What position group needs the most work ASAP? What position group do I need to spend the most resources on as soon as I get to work on this roster? So those are your 2 questions. I want to see what you guys had to say. So off to the comment section we go. So we're going to take a look at what you guys had to say. And let's see. Nah, that's not going to work either because it's in the corner and I can't move it. So we'll have to go with the side by side like that. Or you could just go with it like this and you don't have to see my face because my face is not important. So we'll just do it this way. That way you can see it and it won't be too small. So let's go through some of these comments real quick and see what you guys had to say. So Pearson writes, one of the best things about next season is that everyone will have to compete for their spot. If you're not good enough, then you get replaced. I love that. Let's go ahead and love that. Jack Wilson says, 100% all of these Jags are going to see what's what when we have some great professional coaches and GM at the helm. Honestly, I can't wait. Love that too. NES Tecmo writes, would love a game-changing, uncoverable tight end. Figure Peters' skill set would be easy to find my 1A inside linebacker. So tight end, I can't disagree with that. I've been harping about that. Watching these playoff games, watching the regular season, I think I've come to you guys after like a Monday night game or something over the last 5-6 weeks of the season and said, man, we need one of these. And I've been talking about that for the last 2 years. When Logan Thomas got here, I was bitching about him. Remember? I said, he's not athletic enough. But then he messed around and caught like 70 balls in that first year. And then I just shut up after that. Like, okay, never mind. But I still wanted an athletically gifted tight end, which is why I was so distraught when Curtis what's his face got hurt. Is his name even Curtis? I don't think it's Curtis. Amani Rogers got hurt. I was really, really upset about that. Anyway, Keno writes, Curtis Samuel is the free agent he'd bring back in the linebacker room. I can't disagree with either one of those. Linebacker definitely needs some attention. And you know what's really interesting is Ron and company pretty much diminished the role of a linebacker here in the scheme that him and Jack and company were running. Yet, when you look at the teams that are left in the postseason right now, you could argue with the 4 teams, you're talking about some of the best linebacker groups in all of football still left competing. The 49ers and the Ravens are the 2 best linebacker groups in football right now, specifically best linebacker duos with Queen and Smith, Roquan Smith in Baltimore, and of course, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner in San Francisco. And those defenses are among the best in football. And part of the reason why is because their linebackers are so damn good. So I put Kansas City up there too, with Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, Gay, right? Like, they've got a ridiculously athletic group of linebackers that can roam sideline to sideline. We need to upgrade the linebacker position for sure. The Code Talker writes, Cam Curl would be his one guy to bring back, and then the O-line, which you can't go wrong on. And I said that yesterday. I know that's low-hanging fruit for some of you, but you can't go wrong with the offensive line. We literally have one guy on the O-line right now that we trust moving forward. So you can't go wrong with the offensive line. JBWC says, man, why do you think Leno is all right? He's got to go. Please go. It's not that I love Charles Leno or anything like that. It's just that you can't. I don't think there's any way that they're going to fix the entire offensive line in one offseason. Literally, we need 4 new offensive starting linemen potentially. And even if we don't have 4 brand new guys that weren't on the roster the year before, there'll still be 4 new starters more likely than not. I doubt that they start Nick Gates at center. I doubt that Andrew Wiley's your starting right tackle. I doubt that you're going to have Sadiq Charles back as your left guard. So even if you give an opportunity to, Ricky Stromberg, he still didn't start last year. So he'd be a new starter, right? More likely than not, you're going to have 4 new starters on the offensive line. Again, I think we might have had 4 new starting offensive linemen last year. And we might have had like 3 or, 2 or 3 the year before that. Like, we haven't had any continuity up front. So I don't know if you're going to be able to fix the entire offensive line in one offseason. And thus why I keep saying, hey, Leno might be back. He's got 1 year left on his deal. You don't have to do anything with him. You could save money. We're not hurting for cap space right now. So you can do a hell of a lot worse than Charles Leno at left tackle. I'm not telling you I want him at left tackle. If we can draft a left tackle and you feel comfortable with that guy starting at left tackle, please, by all means, do it. But I don't know that we're going to be in a position to draft a left tackle. We might be able to draft a right tackle, and you may have to draft your left tackle next year. All right. Let's see. Steven Hendrickson says, as much as I love Curl and grew to love Samuel, I think Reeves is the no-brainer. Our special teams suffered tremendously after he got injured. As badly as we need a true left tackle, and we've been spoiled with some great ones in my lifetime, 47 years. We need a middle linebacker who is London Fletcher 2.0, a true field general. If the QB works out at pick 2, we can always trade for a left tackle, get one with our first rounder next year, maybe even trade up for one. By the way, I watch your shows daily. You are the best covering the team, and you have some good competition too. But again, you're head and shoulders above the rest. Keep kicking ass, man. We appreciate your hard work and dedication. I appreciate you, Steven. We definitely need a linebacker, clearly. He says Reeves is the no-brainer as the guy you bring back. Was the special teams? It wasn't great last season, obviously. Not up to our normal standard, but it wasn't terrible. But I love Jeremy Reeves, but I don't think that's the guy I would bring back necessarily. I would love to have him back though. You can't. You can find Jeremy Reeveses in the around the league in the draft, et cetera, but he's one of those guys. When this thing turns around, he's one of those guys you would like to be here when it happens. That's just how I feel about him. It's certain guys that when this thing finally turns around and you all the years of losing and dysfunction and all the shit that we've gone through as fans and some of these players have gone through with us, there are certain guys that you would like to see be here when the shit turns around. Jeremy Reeves, Terry McLaurin, obviously Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, if he decides he doesn't want to trade this offseason. Those are the kind of guys that they've been at the bottom. They've seen what the worst of the worst looks like. And then for us to get to the other side, it'd be just as refreshing for those players as it would be for some of us as fans. Mr. Ron B writes, "Hey, Adam, Mr. Ron here. Nice to meet you and welcome to DC. I love it." He says, "In my humble opinion, re-sign Cameron Curl. He has football smarts and we need stability in the defensive backfield, but on one condition. Don't overpay. He's not a playmaker, so pay him accordingly. As far as an area that sorely needs work, I say focus on the linebacker core. Whatever formation your head coach, defensive coordinator decides on, 4-3-3-4, etc., get some dogs who'll make plays out there. Don't entirely ignore the O-line, though. Appreciate the good time and good luck." Love that, Mr. Ron B. So in the video, I specifically made sure I said that it'd be reasonably priced. You don't have to worry about the price. So he won't overpay. In this scenario, it's a reasonable deal for a guy that you want back, that we understand he's not a playmaker, and they pay him accordingly. So Cam Curl it is. And the linebackers, as much as I want to, push linebacker down the list a bit, watching the 49ers, watching the Ravens, I can't help but think, even watching the Lions and seeing their linebacker Barnes make that pick at the end of that game, knowing that none of our linebackers would even come remotely close to sinking underneath that in-breaking route and picking it off. I'm just thinking we definitely have to get better at linebacker. And I know that, but seeing it is like we are light years behind the best of the best in the league. TGS M Gator writes, Cam Curl and linebacker. So ditto. Doofenshmirtz writes, Cam Curl. I feel like Cam was a bright spot, even with subpar coaching, and could step up as a leader in the locker room with the likely loss of a Jonathan Allen. Says offensive line. I don't want a line that's not that bad, right? Or really good at run blocking. Touche. I did say that. We need to make the next QB that takes over here feel as comfortable as possible, point blank, period. Finding a future LB would be great too. You're not wrong about that. I'm not mad at you for that. Touche. CR7's The GOAT says Cam Curl in the edge rushing position. I haven't heard anybody mention edge rusher. We are in desperate need of help there. That is not a bad place to start. Both lines need extensive work. Both lines need extensive work. Logan writes, Samuel will make it easier for a new quarterback, which we saw last year. He's probably the best separator that we have right now. But maybe we'll see more separation from guys when they're in a better scheme. We'll see. And then he says the linebacker position. So linebacker is way out in front right now. I think close second would be, well, the next group would be offensive line. Eric DeBose writes, I'd love to have Curtis back. I think a good OC can use him in a way that becomes invaluable to the offense. Jahan has to show me more, not his fault. Right now, I can trust Curtis as our number 2. Also, I feel the defensive line is a group that really underachieved this year, especially the ends. Once we traded 99 and 90, if you can't pressure the quarterback, it's very hard to win in this league. So he's going with the defensive ends. Smart man. I'm not mad at you for that, Eric. Miss Perry. Shout out to my girl, Miss Perry, who writes Kurtco, so Curtis. And number 2, O-line, specifically left tackle. So she definitely does not want to see Charles Leno protecting the blind side of whomever is under center this season. Touche to that. Again, if you're spending the number 2 overall pick on quarterback, which we all assume is going to be the case, I highly doubt that you'll be able to snag that left tackle that we all desire and covet. Also, I mean, they could always trade up back into the first round, right? Nothing's out of bounds. And we've seen Adam Peters, if the track record that we saw from the 49ers in the draft and their history, we've seen them do things like trade up for Brandon Ayuk, trade back into the first round for Brandon Ayuk, right? And give up draft capital to do so. He's not going to be afraid to do that if he feels like there's a guy there that could be a cornerstone type player. But also keep in mind that those 49ers, when they did that, were on the verge of making a big run. So that is not where we are. So I don't see them, packaging up picks to move up potentially, but you just never know. You just never know. Mike Lowry writes, the free agent I want back the most is Curtis. When healthy, he was pretty consistent throughout the season making plays. The one position I would attack in free agency is edge rusher with middle linebacker right behind it. Daily Grind writes, Fuller would be his free agent to bring back, and the O-line would be what he would look to clean up first. Gotcha. Fuller, I think that's the first Fuller answer we got, and I'm not mad at that at all. Antisocial Sully says Samuel and Curl. Can't pick 2. So we're just going to go with Samuel because you named him first. Most important positions of need, a linebacker. We'll just, in that order, so we'll just take linebacker. Metaphor. First off, Adam Peters ain't asking me shit. It's a hypothetical, man. That being said, he said we find Nick Sundberg off his retirement couch and sing him back as our long snapper. 2, we've got talent at DB. We just need coaching. And we can use some D-line, but they're serviceable, especially in the middle. But linebacker is key. We need dogs. If they're fired up front, they help with the line with the run. And half of our horrendous pass D was over the middle, which the linebackers lack any talent outside of Jamin. Allow for huge explosives and easy conversions to keep hundreds of drives alive. Exit stage left. So linebacker. And he never actually picked a player to bring back. So he said to go get Nick Sundberg off of his retirement couch. RJ McCready writes, Cam Curl as the one he would bring back. O-line is the position he'd get busy on right away. AfroCat says Curtis, even though he's been in the league a minute, still feels like low mileage. He's very young too. I think Curtis is still only going into his age 26 year. Like you could sign him to another 3-year deal and he still wouldn't be 30 yet. Like he's super young. Similar deal to his original, don't have to prioritize another playmaker for a lengthy list of needs. That's a great point. Linebacker, go back and watch the Green Bay versus San Francisco game first quarter. One play stands out to me. 2nd and long, Love checks it down to Aaron Jones. 915 represent. You had to throw that in there. He says, Warner and Greenlaw devour the space while the ball is in midair and blow up AJ up. You watch them get up and they both know what time it is. Getting a QB in the middle of your defense is essential. Having 2 of them can make your defense elite. That's why it's so fun to watch the 49ers and the Ravens. Great point, AfroCat. Eric Sunderland, Cam Curl, and cornerback. That's the first cornerback we've had. And I'll tell you this, cornerback is it. I like when I came up with that concept, man, corner was something that I was thinking about a lot. I'm not going to lie to you guys. We're going to have a discussion about that here in a second. Good one, Eric. MYKG says Kurt Cole, most dependable but underused. So that'll be the player that he brings back. Defensive ends need to get to the quarterback more, which will help the linebackers and DBs. Okay, so another defensive end, which I think is a great recommendation. Manny writes, only player I want re-signed is Curtis. Gotcha. Vontae writes, Cam Curl as the player he'd bring back. D-line as the position that he would overhaul first. Again, we need defensive ends like we need air to breathe. Layla Brown writes, Curtis Samuel as the player she'd bring back. 2, if we're drafting a QB, then O-line, of course. So she's like, look, if you're going to invest in a quarterback number 2 overall, then you better protect him. I am not mad at that at all. Shoot yourself. Says Kendall Fuller as the one player he'd bring back. Linebacker is the position that they'd look to upgrade. Robert Hernandez says, for me, it's got to be Cam to bring back. And defensive end, don't want Casey Tuha out there as our starter next season. Neither do I, Robert. Neither do I. Stu writes, sort out the O-line and whatever it's needed in the defense. Gotcha. Leon Polk writes, Kendall Fuller as the player he'd bring back and linebacker as the position he'd attack first. So a lot of linebackers. I'm actually surprised that I think you guys have been watching the postseason as we all have. And the thing that has stuck out to you the most is just the sheer difference in what good defenses look like and having linebackers be at the core of that and what our defense looked like. And, you know, after looking at all these defensive metrics and looking at some of these candidates, one thing that stuck out to me, we were the worst defensively this year. We gave up the most points this year. We gave up the most passing touchdowns this year. You know, we were one of the worst pass defenses in football. We sucked ass defensively. Man, it was bad. Somebody said this probably like a month and a half ago when there was still like probably 6-7 weeks left in the season. You know, this is going to be the worst defense right after we traded Montez and Chase. This is going to be the worst defense in Washington history. And I was like, man, no, it's not. We've seen some bad defenses here before. This one's not going to even be close. I think I was wrong, and that person was probably spot on. Spot on. This might have been the worst defense we've ever seen. I don't like to be a prisoner of the moment. This was a really bad defense. You know, I think losing makes it worse, though, because if I'm not mistaken, the 82 defense was horrible. They called it the Pearl Harbor crew because they always were getting bombed on, right? And they gave up a bunch of points that year. They also forced a ridiculous amount of turnovers, though. Anyway, I digress. Brandon Deems writes, I'd say Curl for the first question and O-line, cornerback, and linebacker for the second. So O-line would be your first choice, and Curl would be the player that you would bring back. Cody writes, Kendall Fuller, tight between him and Curtis. I get it. And then defensive end would be the position that he would tighten up first. Yeah, Kendall Fuller, that's an interesting one. Kyle Forte writes, Cam Curl and edge rusher. Again, can't go wrong with those two answers. We've seen that combination a few times. We've seen Cam Curl as the guy to bring back a number of times, along with Curtis Samuel. I think those are the two leaders in the clubhouse. And then Kendall Fuller, I think, has been a distant third. L.B. Lucas writes, Samuel for our new quarterback and the linebackers need the most help. Gotcha. All right. Rip21, Miss Sean Taylor writes, 1, keep Gibby. If they're going to bring in an OC that would properly use him. FYI, B-Rob and AG both average 3 fumbles per year. Look it up. D-line, number 2. I know the linebackers and secondary suck as well, but I think the D-line is the most important unit after trading Sweat and Young. They get no pressure. Facts. Cole Hunt writes, Cam Curl. He fits the timeline that he's only 25. Would love Curtis Samuel and Kendall Fuller, but they are closer to 30. Curtis, how old is Curtis? I might be tripping on his age. I could swear that Curtis. Let me check. I'm gonna check. To see how old Curtis is. He's 27, actually. So I was wrong about that. Thought he was 25. He might have been 25 when we signed him. And he'll be 28. So, I mean, he's still, even if you sign him to a 3-year deal, he'll be 30 at the end of that deal. I'm not tripping about it, to be honest with you. Personally, I'd bring Curtis back, even though you're right. He is closer to 30. Cam Curl does fit the timeline better. You're not wrong about that. You're not wrong. Offensive line, I think you are right. It's not as bad as we make it out to be, but I think for this upcoming season, we need to put a lot of resources into helping the young quarterback transition into the NFL. Having a start offensive line will help his long-term development. You're not wrong. But that Texans offensive line wasn't great this season. And now they do have a left tackle. And that, I think that matters more than anything else because he can't see what's going on behind him. And when you can just trust that the guy at left tackle is going to hold it down for you, we can figure out the rest, right? Anyway, Willis Lee writes, 1, Kendall Fuller is the player he'd bring back. O-line, Ben Johnson will work his magic with them. We'll come back to that. Stephen Strong writes, clean house on he doesn't want Hey, go ahead. Big Blue Horses. Curl as a player he'd bring back. DBs. Any Sean Taylors in this draft, we need a couple. Unfortunately, they don't grow on trees, and they don't make those anymore. Q-Dog writes, Curtis Samuel and linebackers. Jordan Like the GOAT says Kendall Fuller and defensive line. We have nothing at the end. L. Simpson says, my guy Zoe, Curtis Samuel as the play bring back linebacker. So again, we've seen, I think linebacker is way out in front here. I think the offensive line and then edge rushers or the D line would be number 3. Alan Etheridge writes, Curtis Samuel as the player he'd bring back, and then linebacker and edge rusher. So linebacker is what we'll go with. I think Curtis might be out in front, but Cam Curl is right there. Right there. Joe Rockhead writes, this was very difficult to just pick one. Nevertheless, I choose, drum roll, Kendall Fuller. The unit that needs to be addressed, I believe, in fixing building inside out. So either it's O-line or D-line. That being said, I'm going with the offensive line, primarily because it's a must for the eventual young QB, and it's a project that typically takes more time and needs the most depth. Not bad rationale at all. Commander Joe, Curtis Samuel, and the secondary. Another secondary. I think that's only the second person that's mentioned the secondary. Diego Barco writes, Kendall Fuller. Number 2, draft a nickel corner. Obviously, we need O-line, linebacker, tight end, QB, but if you get a nickel corner, it solves a lot of problems on defense. I think Fuller, Forbes, and St. Juice can play better if they had a good nickel. We need a better tight end. That would solve a lot of issues on offense, keep our 3 receivers, but just in case, we should get a great tight end, for emergency. So draft a nickel. So he would go to the secondary, essentially. HTTC writes, O-line and Curtis Samuel. Gotcha. Mega writes, Reeves, Fuller, and Curls. So I will go with Reeves. That was the first person. He said, maybe Kurt Cole if we can get a decent deal. So we'll go with Curtis because I said in the video, don't worry about money. It'll be a fair deal for both sides. He says, I have 2 position groups that need the most help, linebacker and cornerback. Would have said O-line, but we need one or two starters, and the O-line can be more serviceable, need more depth than anything else. So we'll go with linebackers. He mentioned them first. My guy, Twin D, DD Slice, writes, what up, LT? Twin D here. Bring back player Curtis Samuel. A bright offensive mind could optimize his skill set. With Terry and Jahan, we'd be able to do some of the things we thought we'd do this past year. Great point. Great point. Position group, linebacker. It's been quite some time since we've had linebackers we could rely on instead of watching other teams' linebackers and wanting just one player they have like they have. Facts. So another linebacker added. Dylan Hinton says Curtis for the player to bring back and corner for the position that he would attack. Almighty Manny, defensive backs, defensive backs, and keep Curtis. We'll go with that. You got a whole bunch of guys, but Curtis is the first one you named. Brian Butler, Curtis Samuel is the player you'd bring back, and tight end would be the position you'd crack down on first. Carson Chavis writes Cam Curl and linebacker. All right. Kevin the PRF says Curtis Samuel, give our new quarterback as many weapons as possible. 2, he said avoid offensive tackle specifically, which would be my choice. I said he says linebacker. So he would have gone offensive tackle, but he said he'll just go and say linebacker. Pepperface says, I'm taking defensive tackle David Bonnet free agents. He said, besides QB, our weakest position group is linebacker. So you take backers. FNA. Okay. Right. I think we need a burner wide receiver to take the X spot. Free up Terry a lot, having a speedster, deep threat. Having that threat alone will make the O-line better. Just knowing our wideouts are dangerous. Can't get it to that deep threat if you can't hold up in pass protection, though. So kind of a double-edged sword there. Robert Mitchell says Fuller as the player he'd bring back, edge rusher as the position he would go after first. Booker writes, I would love to see Kendall back. I don't know what our defensive scheme will be. Fuller is not a man corner, but to me, Fuller can play not only quarter, but safety as well. To me, he seems like whoever we have coordinator-wise, Fuller has a spot in the starting lineup. The offensive line needs the most work. Not only is it the most important, but we got left tackle, right tackle, left guard, and center are all question marks. Secondly, going to say linebacker. The more ball I watch, the more underwhelming our linebackers look. Even Jamin is remarkably average in year 3, mind you, and the rest shouldn't touch the starting lineup. Thanks. Yoda writes, I would love to see Cam and Fuller, but I will take Cam and work on middle linebacker. Rom says Curl and O-line as the 2 answers. Super duper DB GOAT writes Antonio Gibson because I feel like no one used him to his full potential. He's literally a nightmare matchup for linebackers in the pass game and run strong. DN, simply because I feel like no matter if we go and get the best DBs or linebackers without a pass rush, they won't be successful as they can be. Pass rush helps everything else on the defense. So then there's an argument to be had. The chicken or the egg. All right, so we got a million comments, and we're not going to get to all of these. I just want to see how much further we had to go. I appreciate y'all jumping in here, though. We'll take about 10 more of these, and then we'll move on. Ronald Tillman says none, so he wouldn't bring back any players. And then he says they should take 2 tackles in the second round, so work on the offensive line. One Party writes, Cam Curl, I believe he's one of the few bright spots in secondary and playmaking. based on rookie season, I have faith he'll revert back to making those plays that made him and Defoe. It can be a good safety tandem. So he says he's taking Cam Curl. In my opinion, would be Curtis, but I feel like we can get a big body receiver in the draft we've been looking for, and Curl would be cheaper than Curtis. DN and linebacker are screaming for help. All right, let's get to the bottom. Let me reward some of the people that I think. Let me see. Let's go to filter and we'll go to, let's see. That's not what I wanted to do. Spot status. Nah, that ain't what I want. Let's see if I can type in something. Let's see. Oldest. Nope. That didn't help me. Oh, maybe I can do it over here. Newest first. There we go. And we'll go all the way to the bottom. And we'll get some of the ones that were first in the comment section when I posted the video. We'll knock some of those out. And then we'll go out on about our business. Let's reward those who jumped in here when the video was first uploaded. And give them some love. Here we go. Let's knock out some of these. Dirt to Doorbell says K full. And his second question would be O-line is what he would do. Barrett Downing says he's bringing back Curtis Samuel. TJ Julius says Cam Curl and linebackers. That's been a very, very popular combination. MHJ to DC writes, sign Curtis if we don't take MHJ. If they do, sign Curl. And then edge rusher would be the position group he'd work on first. Joseph's Journey says, I would say Curtis Samuel, but let's make a move for Stephon Diggs instead. Negative, Joseph. That's a no-no. Oz Duke says 1 Fuller and 2 edge rushers. So K full in the place to be. JBWC says Cam. All right. Commander Cole says toss up between Cam Curl and Jeremy Reeves because without Reeves, the special teams was literally garbage. Maybe I'm tripping about special teams. Did we give up big plays? We did at the beginning of the year when Jeremy Reeves was healthy, like the Denver punt return. I don't remember us giving up anything, but you know what? I might be tripping. You know, when you're bad, shit starts to run together. Special teams might have been horrible without him. We had a punt block, didn't we? We had some shit go on. Yeah, never mind. Yeah, it was probably pretty bad. Now that I'm thinking about it. Tress was back there kicking scared. Yeah, Curtis Samuel and linebacker for user. So Ninja X writes, I would resign Revo and draft a DB, either safety or floating corner to mitigate the deep play weakness. Pretty Adrian says, resign Curl and bring in O-line and linebacker. All right. So my understood writes, no, resign, go free agency, and tight end and wide receiver would be the 2 positions. We just need one. We'll go with tight end there. Robert Gamble Jr. writes, what if Ben comes here and likes what he saw from Justin and thinks he could get him where he needs to be? I don't see that happening. Grumpy old man says the towel boy and the mop boy. Makes me think of Water Boy when they put the towel boy in and he got like a clothesline from hell and flipped over. And Dan Patrick says, but he ran into a laundry list of problems. Michelle to Henderson writes, Fuller, hands down, offensive tackle. Got you and got you. Severio P says, keep Cam if he doesn't hold out for top money. The O-line was trash, but he says, I bet there's not a single Commanders fan other than you who would be okay with putting a rookie quarterback. I didn't say I wanted to put him behind this offensive line. Y'all love putting words in people's mouths. I never said that don't do anything to the offensive line. I just said it's not as bad as you guys think. That's what I said. I didn't say leave the offensive line as is. I never said that. Anyway, I digress. User says, Adam, you need better players everywhere. I think he already knows he's going to need to really do an overhaul of this roster. Anyway, I digress. All right, so that was a fun exercise. So let's get to one thing from those comments. Secondary. Not a lot of you said secondary. And there were no wrong answers to this exercise, by the way. This was from your prism, from your lens, what you would do. For me personally, the low-hanging fruit is offensive line. And that's what I would want to fix first. Offensive line, especially if you're going to put a young quarterback behind that offensive line. Clearly, that's what you need to upgrade first and foremost. You want Ben Johnson to be at his best, you need to get the offensive line to where he can call the plays he wants to call and not have to worry about protecting the offensive line. That's what he was able to do in Detroit. If you want to replicate the success he had in Detroit, then you need to give him some of those pieces here. And so I think that's the first thing you would have to do. But I just wanted to throw this out there. If I wasn't picking offensive line, if I wanted to go against the grain, I would probably go with the secondary. Now, the player that I would bring back, I too would bring back Curtis Samuel. I think you can still go out because we still don't have a big receiver, and you could still go out and get one if you so desired. But I think about the Detroit line. They don't have a big receiver. They got a tight end. They don't. All their receivers are roughly the same size, just like the ones we have now. A guy like Josh Reynolds, he's probably about 6'3", so he's pretty big, 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there. But for the most part, their receivers look a lot like ours. They don't have any really big guys. Anyway, Curtis, I think, gives you an opportunity because, like my guy, I think it was Joe Rockhead who said, bring back Curtis because with those three and a better play caller, you may be able to get them to look the way that we thought they could look this year with Eric Bieniemy. We were so adamant that Jahan was going to have a breakout season and Curtis was going to morph into this mega number 3, and Terry was going to have his best season of his career statistically. None of those things happened. What did happen, though, was Curtis showed his consistency. He ran it back from the season before, stayed relatively healthy, and was probably the most reliable receiver we had, which is crazy because we still had Terry McLaurin. But in terms of separating, catching touchdowns, he probably led the team in touchdown grabs. That would be my guess. Curtis Samuel did. And he seemed to be the one that showed up most weeks. Now, I think Terry had the more explosive plays, right? Which those didn't seem like they were nearly enough. But when we did have some explosives, they seemed like they were going to Terry. Anyway, I digress. Secondary, specifically the cornerback position, I think is in dire straits, just like the defensive line is. Because if you think about it, if there's no Kendall Fuller, you've got Forbes. We still don't know what he is, and I'm not going to do to him as some of you have and use the B word on him. He's a young guy. We'll see what happens. But we can't trust him yet. We don't know what he is yet. I know what Benjamin St. Juste is, and he's no more than to me, a backup. He's no more than a backup corner in this league unless you have a system that fits his skill set. Unless you're going to bring a system in here that allows you to play zone, keep everything in front of you, and you know, Juiced is one of those dudes that I don't know if he's great in off coverage. He's better when he's up in the receiver's face because he likes to put his hands on them. But again, he can get beat. We've seen that time and time again. Anytime he gets in somebody's face, they cook him. But that's when he's at his best, when he can put his hands on the receiver because he loves to be handsy. So I think you need to replace Juice, honestly. If Fuller's not back, you don't have a starting corner. We still don't have a nickel. Forget about depth. We don't even have starters in the secondary, specifically at the cornerback position. So I think a lot of work needs to be done there, especially if you don't bring back Kendall Fuller. If you bring back Fuller, then you may have Fuller and Forbes potentially starting. You still got Juice on the roster, and then you just need to find you a nickel. We're back to where we were last year. You don't bring back Fuller, it could get ugly because now, again, and I don't want St. Juice anywhere near the slot this year. Nowhere near the slot. I don't know whose bright idea it was to even try to stick him in the slot, but I'd like to keep him as far away from the slot as humanly possible. So some work needs to be done at the cornerback position. There's only so much you can do, right? We it's not like we have 15 draft picks. We only have 10. And remember, the first 6 or 7 of them are the ones that are probably going to be impactful. The rest of them, you just cross your fingers and hope. Now we got a GM that has done some great work in those back, 3-4 rounds of the draft. So you're not as wishful. You're more expecting a hit or two on the back end with Adam Peters. But even with that said, in his track record, it's still a crapshoot. I just wanted to throw that out there. Secondary without Kendall Fuller back could be a very, very sticky and dicey position on this roster, as many of them, as you've already pointed out, might be. And we're going to turn the roster over anyway, so we'll see what happens. But I digress. Let's get to my shopping list of defensive coordinators. So just for the record, I'll say this once again. I fully expect Ben Johnson to be named the head coach of this football team sometime on Monday. They're going to meet with him. And honestly, I don't know how it goes. The Lions, so the NFC Championship game is the final game. So there's no meeting with him on Sunday. So had they been the first game, maybe Washington could have met with him on Saturday night, got the ball rolling. But being that their game is at 6:30, they're not going to be done until 10-something, potentially 10 o'clock at night. There's no way a meeting is getting done then. And we don't need to rush. We can just meet them the next day. They're flying out on Sunday. I would assume that they'll interview him Monday. And if he checks out, if everything checks out, if he, wants the job, it's his. I'm pretty sure they've already dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and all they really need to do is just meet and knock out all of the particulars. That's pretty much what they probably need to do at this point. They've done a Zoom with him. It's not like they haven't already met with him. So I think it's essentially a done deal as long as we can get all the particulars hammered out. If that's truly the guy that they want, I think that's what's going to happen. That said, we need a defensive coordinator. And we've heard that if Ben Johnson, I'm not going to use the word if anymore, when Ben Johnson is hired as the next Commanders head coach, he's going to bring Hank Fraley with him as his offensive coordinator, which I would love. Hank Fraley, former Philadelphia Eagles, Cleveland Browns offensive lineman in the league, has done wonders with that Lions offensive line. He's the current offensive lines coach for the Detroit Lions, and I would love to have him come here. I think we need a teacher. I think we need a guy that can come in here and whip the offensive line into shape. We may have players already on the roster that can get it done. We've got a former Arkansas center on our roster. They took a center from Arkansas and made him an all-pro type player in Frank Ragnow we could maybe do the same thing here with Ricky Stromberg. Who knows, right? You get the right guy in here, and he could change some things, right? So we'll see. I would love him to bring Hank Fraley here with him and have him be the offensive coordinator / O-line coach, right? That'd be great. But we don't know what's going to happen with defensive coordinator. And I've long said that in situations where you get a new head coach, always be on the lookout for a guy that he can bring with him. So you never want to discount that. Also look for connections. Look for a connection where you may have crossed paths with this person in particular at some point of your career. And maybe now that you've got an opportunity, you may be able to reach back and grab that guy, right? Maybe he made a profound impact on you when you guys crossed paths the first time. So always think about those things. Think about some of the guys that are here in Washington, like Peters, like Eugene Shin, and some of the impact that they may have, and they may be able to voice some guys that they may think are, extremely sharp and ready for an opportunity. So don't discount those things as well. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to, and I'm looking in the comment section, and somebody said Dan Quinn, third interview. Wow. I don't know if that third interview is what you guys think it is. Because that third interview, and I know some of you may scoff at this, that third interview with Dan Quinn could be them simply saying, hey, look, if you don't get hired as a head coach, let's say the Seahawks go with Mike Vrabel, and let's say that we end up going with Ben Johnson, and they wouldn't tell him that, but they would just be gauging his interest. What would you say about potentially being a defensive coordinator here? That could be what the third meeting is all about. You never know, right? But that's something to keep in. Like, I always like in situations like this, just doing your due diligence. You might meet with a guy at the draft, a player at the draft that you will have no chance in hell of drafting. But why do you do it anyway? Because you just never know when you're going up against this player. You might have some intel that you were able to gather from him during these interviews. Or if he becomes a free agent down the line, you can say, hey, I really like this kid. I remember when we talked to him. Or you got a chance to go trade for him 2-3 years down the road, right? You just never know. So you always get as much intel as you can. Maybe that's what they're doing with Dan Quinn. Like, I wouldn't read too much into it. Ben Johnson is the guy. Again, if they loved Dan Quinn this much, they just hire him, right? Why wait till Sunday? Why wait until you talk to Ben Johnson? You've already Zoomed with Ben Johnson, so you already got an idea if you like him or not. Why wait? And nobody else is waiting, clearly. Everybody else is getting their guy. You know why everybody else is moving on? You know why Carolina moved on? You want to know why all these other teams who wanted to talk to Ben Johnson, who did over Zoom, who would love to talk to Ben Johnson in an interview face-to-face, but said, you know what, to hell with it. You know why they did that? Because they know he's going to Washington. I'm not waiting on Ben Johnson. I know he's going to Washington. So don't worry about that. That's all I would tell you. Anyway, I digress. So I'm going to give you some names of some guys that I compiled a list, and we'll see if any of these guys turn out to be one of the guys that ultimately end up here. It could be none of these guys. It could be one of these guys. We'll see. But that's the beauty of this process. You just don't know. So the first guy on the list, and this is in no particular order. This isn't me listing them in the order in which I would get them. It's just a list that I compiled trying to think of guys that are, hot defensive coordinator names that have put in the work that may be ready for an opportunity, or who have already proven themselves as quality defensive coordinators who just happen to be out of work right now, whatever the case may be. The first guy is Ejiro Evero. We've talked about him. This is not the first time we've brought his name up. So he was the offensive or defensive coordinator, excuse me, in Carolina this past year. He was the defensive coordinator for his very first time in 2022 for the Denver Broncos. So I'll give you a little bit of background on Ejiro Evero. He first broke into the NFL as an assistant in Tampa Bay back in 2007. So that means he adopted the style of the great Monty Kiffin. So, you know, again, when you are an offensive coach, a defensive coach, you build your system around all of the different systems that you've been around, all of the different coaches that have impacted you, have shaped and molded you. You put some of their pieces of their scheme into yours, right? But at some point, there's a foundation. You know, there's a base for what it is you do. I think his starts in Tampa Bay with Monty Kiffin. That said, let's talk about the 2 years that matter the most to us, which were his 2 defensive coordinator years. In Denver, his first shot at being a coordinator in 2022, he had the 8th overall defense in the league off of the metric of yards, right? He blitzed 33% of the time, did Ejiro Evero. So that's 4th most in the league that year. 13th pass defense that year, 10th rush defense that year. They were 14th in the league, points per game given up at 21.1. And they gave up the 5th fewest passing touchdowns in the league in 2022, did the Denver Broncos. All right. So he was solid, really solid in Denver, which is what got him another opportunity after that whole Denver situation was blown up. They got rid of the head coach, moved on, and Sean Payton came in. Evero went to Carolina, and he was their defensive coordinator. We know how bad that offense was last year. And so that defense was put in some tough positions over and over and over again. And they rose to the occasion a lot of times. They kept that team in a lot of ball games that otherwise they wouldn't have been in had the defense been awful. But that said, it wasn't a great defense, but it was a good defense considering the circumstances. So in 2023, they were 4th overall in defense from a yards perspective, right? It's pretty damn good. He blitzed 28.5% of the time, which was right in the middle of the league, like 16th in the league. Okay. Understanding that they were 4th overall in total defense with yards being the metric, they did this while being the absolute worst team in the league getting to the quarterback. 27 sacks. You can take that however you want. Either guys weren't winning individually one-on-one, or he wasn't scheming it up, or teams were getting it out of their hands quickly. Combination of the 3, whatever the case may be, they didn't get to the quarterback. And they still had the 4th fewest yards given up in the league. So that says something. They also gave up the 4th fewest passing touchdowns in the NFL last season. Now, they had the 3rd ranked pass defense, did the Panthers last year, but they had the 23rd ranked rush defense. So you could run the football on them. They gave up the 29th most points. So 4th most points given up in the league per game, 29.5. Obviously, yeah, I take that with a grain of salt because their offense was bad. Bryce Young did throw some pick sixes last year. There were fumbles and interceptions that were thrown that put the defense in some tough spots where they come on the field and they're defending 19 yards of grass, or they're defending 8 yards of grass, situations like that. Or you go 3 and out at your own 6, and now they're punting and the ball is punted and returned to the 39-yard line, and that's the field position. You got 39 yards of grass to defend. So they were put in some tough spots. Not to make excuses for them, because you can still get stops in those situations, right? Anyway, so that's Ejiro Evero. Next guy is Al Harris. He is the defensive backs coach currently in Dallas. We've seen what he's done with those defensive backs. So let's talk about Al Harris, and then we'll talk about his background and the resume that he has. Al Harris, coaching intern in Miami in 2012. So that's the link and the connection to Ben Johnson. All right. Ben Johnson started his NFL coaching career in Miami in 2011. And so him and Al Harris crossed paths in 2012. Now, whether they, just said what's up to each other and never spoke to each other again, or they actually conversed with one another, don't know, because Al Harris wasn't that far removed from being a player. So who knows if they even really spoke to each other at all and even have a relationship at all. But they did cross paths in Miami in 2012. That said, Al Harris from 2013 to 2018 was the Kansas City Chiefs defensive backs assistant. Okay. He was a secondary assistant. In 2020, he got an opportunity in Dallas to be the defensive backs coach, took advantage of that, and has been their defensive backs coach ever since 2020. So for the last 4 years, he's been the DBs coach in Dallas. And some of the things that are on his resume is, you look at some of those guys in Dallas. I'll give you a few names in particular. Trayvon Diggs came to Dallas as a corner turned wide receiver turned cornerback. He was extremely raw because I think he only played 2 years of corner at Alabama before entering the draft. So he came in, which is why he was getting cooked early in his career. Still was getting cooked, before he got injured, but he had turned into one of the better corners under the tutelage of Al Harris. We've seen what Deron Bland has done in his 2 years in the NFL. He set the NFL record for most pick sixes in a season. So Al Harris, huge credit there being given for Deron Bland's stardom right now. You think about a guy like Hooker, Malik Hooker, former first-round pick, former top 5 pick. And this is a guy that didn't make it in Indianapolis, injuries, poor play, whatever. Goes to Dallas, resurrects his career. Another guy, 7th-round pick. I believe he was a 7th-round pick. He might have been sooner than that. But what is the damn safety's name that came from Minnesota? Big, tall-ass dude that came from Clemson. I can't remember his damn name, but he's played some really good football in Dallas. He's played some really good ball in Dallas. A lot of people counted him out, including myself. And Al Harris, again, working wonders with those guys in the secondary. I think the guy that I've been most impressed with, though, in Dallas is Donovan Wilson, the safety. He is a menace. And again, got to give all credit to anybody in that secondary and the way that they're playing to Al Harris. Even Marquise Bell, who is more of a linebacker, but was a safety converted to linebacker. A lot of success stories in Dallas in the secondary. Some of that credit probably can be given to Al Harris. So another name to keep in mind. Next name, Wink Martindale. J-Ron Curse. Thank you, Mike Jink. J-Ron Curse. That's his damn name. Thank you. He's played well for Dallas. A lot of people, including myself, left his career for dead after it didn't work in Minnesota. Wink Martindale. So there are a lot of people who were like, yo, what about Wink Martindale? I was like, nah, I'm good. Yeah, he's too aggressive for me. We just don't have those types of players for you to be that. If you're going to be that aggressive, you better have some dogs that'll back you up and make you right. And so we'll go through Wink Martindale real quick. I'm not a Wink Martindale fan. Y'all already know how I feel. I like his style, just not for us. Not for us. He was the Broncos DC in 2010. They were awful, like dead last in almost every statistical category known to mankind back in 2010. All right, so of course he was one and done there. Then he doesn't become a defensive coordinator again until Baltimore in 2018. So he gets a second shot at being a defensive coordinator, and he's their coordinator in Baltimore from 2018 to 2021. So we'll go through those 4 years here quickly, give you some stats at some of the key statistics. And then he was the DC in New York for the Giants the last 2 years, and then we'll give you some numbers from there, right? So in 2018, his first year as Ravens DC, Wink Martindale had the Ravens defense ranked second in the league. He blitzed 39.6 times, 39.6% of the time, which ranked first in the NFL. Most blitzes in the league that year. Pass defense, fifth in the league that year in 2018. Run defense, fourth in the NFL. And they were second in the NFL at 17.99 points given up per game. In 2019, Wink Martindale, third ranked Ravens defense. His blitz rate went up from 39.6 in his first year to 55% in 2019, which was good for first in the league. Most blitzes per game in the league. Pass defense, sixth in the league. Run defense, fifth in the league. Scoring defense, third in the league that year. They gave up 17.6 points a game. So again, he's killing it these first 2 years. How about his third year in Baltimore, 2020? Second ranked defense. So in his first 3 years in Baltimore, second, third, second rated defense in the NFL. He blitzed 44% of the time in his third year in 2020, which was good for, wait for it, first in the league, most blitzes in the NFL that year. Sixth ranked pass defense, eighth ranked rush defense, second best points per game given up at 18.9. So he was crushing it as Ravens defensive coordinator. And then came 2021. Bunch of injuries, a little bit of roster turnover. Some of the players got old, like Jimmy, what was his name? Jimmy something, number 22. I can't remember his name. But yeah, a lot of shit happened all at once. And it went from great to not so great fast. So 2021, last year in Baltimore, they go from the second best defense to the 19th rated defense in the NFL. Jimmy Smith, thank you, House, and just Andre. Jimmy Smith got old. All that shit happened. Injuries, Jimmy Smith got old. All that shit happened at once, right? Blitz rate came down 31.1%, which was good for eighth best in the league. However, the blitz rate came down because John Harbaugh went to him and said, bro, you got to stop blitzing. We getting cooked on the back end. All right. We getting cooked. We don't have the corners. You got to stop blitzing. It's the same thing that happened to him this year at one point and that's where the friction began with him and the Giants head coach, Brian Daboll, was like, bro, you got to stop blitzing. We getting cooked. He only knows one thing, right? Their pass defense in 2021 went from sixth best in the league to dead last in the NFL. Their run defense, however, was first. And this wasn't one of those instances where, oh, we're having so much success throwing it, why run it? And that's why they were number one in the league. No, they had just as many rushing attempts on them as any other team in the league. They just stopped the bitch. That's all. And then scoring defensively, points per game, they were 19th in the league at 23.1, and then he was fired, right? So he then goes to the Giants in 2022, where the Giants defensively were ranked 25th in the league in 2022. He blitzed 39.7% of the time, which was good for first in the league, okay? Their pass defense was 15th in the league. Their rush defense was 27th. And their points per game was 18th in the league. They gave up 21.8 points. But remember, they went to the playoffs. They won a playoff game, et cetera, et cetera. Now, 2023, I told you, winning cleans up a lot of shit. The 2022 Giants won. So those weren't great statistics. Those weren't great numbers. but they overachieved and people were excited and they won a playoff game. So it was all good. And he had done a really good job given the parts that he was given to work with. You go to 2023, expectations are a little bit higher. You're coming off of a playoff win. We give you more talent, right? Go draft some guys. You know, Deonte Banks, you go out and you sign Bobby Okereke, right? And so we're giving you more stuff. Now some of these guys have been in your system for an additional year. We expect this to be better. But it's not. 27th ranked overall. So they were 25th in 2022, 27th in 2023. Blitz percentage went up from 39.7 to 45.4, which was good for second. Aha, I tricked you. You thought I was going to say first. Only the Vikings under their defensive coordinator, what's my man that used to be the head coach of the Dolphins? I can see his face. Y'all will tell me in the chat. Used to be the Dolphins head coach, came from New England, and was about to be blackballed from the NFL, but Mike Tomlin saved him. What's his name? Flores. Thank you, Mike Jink. Brian Flores. He was the one that blitzed more than Wink Martindale 50% of the time. Brian Flores blitzed in Minnesota this year. Pass defense, 19th in the league. Was 15th the year prior. Run defense was 27th in 2022, 29th in 2023. Points per game given up 18th in the league in 2022, 26th in 2023, giving up 23.9 points per game. So the Giants and Wink Martindale mutually agreed to part ways. So he's available. I don't want any parts of him, but we'll see what happens with Wink Martindale. Here's an interesting one that I'm going to throw at you here. So I don't know if you guys remember, fairly early in the process, Washington, their very first Zoom interview was with Anthony Weaver, who is currently the Baltimore Ravens associate head coach and D-line coach. So I don't know how this works precisely. So why this one is interesting is Anthony Weaver technically is the associate head coach. I think the Ravens did this intentionally because maybe a defensive coordinator position isn't a promotion over associate head coach. You'd have to give him a title that may suggest that he is some sort of assistant head coach, something like that would upgrade associate head coach, right? But I would think he's really just a glorified defensive line coach. That's really what his job description is. And they threw the other title on, I think, to stop other teams from being able to poach him, maybe. That's my guess. Whatever the case may be, I would love to know, because I think they have an in-person interview scheduled with him. I would love to know if he's actually available as a defensive coordinator, because I would think if I'm Anthony Weaver, to hell with the associate head coaching title, because if something happens to Harbaugh, he's not going to be promoted to head coach, I don't think, right? There's probably other guys on that staff that they'd give an opportunity to before him. I don't know. I'd guess one of the coordinators would probably be promoted to, especially if Mike McDonald doesn't get a job. I'd like to think that somebody like that would do, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is, if I'm Anthony Weaver, and all I've ever been is a defensive line coach in my career, and I'll go through his credentials here in a second, and I get an opportunity to be a defensive coordinator, I want to take that. So I'm interested because the Ravens, the reason I bring it up is because the Ravens could block him from interviewing with us. They couldn't block us when we said, hey, we're interviewing him for the head coaching position. They can't block us. But if we say, hey, can we interview him for defensive coordinator? They can say, no. You're not interviewing our guy for defensive coordinator if it is not a promotion. So I wonder if having that associate head coaching title would allow the Ravens to block any team looking to try to hire him as a defensive coordinator. If they want to do right by Anthony Weaver, they could just say, hey, go right ahead, man. We want you to win. Or they could say, nah, he's ours. Back off. That's why they slapped the title on him. I don't know. That's an interesting one. He's still on my list, right? Was he still on the list? Because he's not getting a head coaching job. He was an NFL pro for 7 years. That always helps. Always great to have a guy that's relatable to players. He's been a D-line coach 3 times in his career. 2013 in Buffalo, 2014 and 15 in Cleveland, and now in Houston, he was the defensive line coach from 2016 to 2020. So now in Baltimore, he became the D-line / run game coordinator in 2021. And then 2022, he became an associate head coach and D-line coach, which I think he's really just a D-line coach. They slapped that other tag on him and title to probably keep other teams away. No, if someone else said, hey, we would like to have him as our defensive line coach. Well, we slapped him with the associate head coaching title, so you can't have him, right? I wonder if that applies to being a defensive coordinator. Anyway, in 2020, here's something interesting. He was a defensive coordinator / D-line coach. I never liked the defensive coordinator / anything else. If you're the defensive coordinator, then you're the defensive coordinator, which that should tell you something's up. So I did some more digging because I'm like, there's no way, like Belichick would do that in New England, make somebody the defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. That's bullshit. Either you're the play caller or you're not, right? On defense. Either you're play caller or you're not. If you're doing 2 things, that means you're not doing the defensive coordinator job for real. And so I went digging, and Romeo Crennel was the assistant head coach on that staff. He was the real defensive coordinator. Okay. So really, Anthony Weaver's never actually been a defensive coordinator with, the entire defense being his to call. He's interesting. We've heard this multiple times when talking about this team and how they want to essentially model this organization, how our owner is smitten with how the Ravens do things, okay? And so Josh Harris has been to their facility, thinks it's gorgeous. When we went there for the joint practices, Eugene Shin came from there. That's not a coincidence. I think he really wants to, get as many pieces from Baltimore as he can. But he's going to allow, this to be done organically. He's not going to force the issue, but I'm not saying, I'm just saying, look out for Anthony Weaver. That's all I'm saying. If that's even on the table. Jesse Minter, I just thought I'd bring him up because, again, another guy with Ravens ties, right? So in watching the whole Harbaugh and then studying Mike McDonald and now looking at Jesse Minter, what I've realized is that the Harbaugh brothers was running some mean 2-man game, right? Like some real give and go, pick and roll type shit. Some John Stockton, Karl Malone shit in Baltimore and Michigan, right? They were feeding each other and funneling each other talent. Like, hey, I got a dude here, been in the system for about 5 years. I think he's ready to be a coordinator. I'm going to send him to you. You go ahead, clean him up, and when you're done, send him back to me. Like, they did that with Mike McDonald in 2021, right? He'd been in the Ravens organization for like 5 years, and John was like, I think he's ready to be a coordinator, but not at the NFL level. I'm going to slide him to you. You clean him up, get him ready, package him up, send him back to me, and then I'm going to send you a dude that I got here in Baltimore, and Jesse Minter. When you're done with him, I'm going to send you Jesse. You clean Jesse up, and then we'll go from there, right? So Jesse Minter was a Ravens assistant from 2017 to 2019. Then he was the Ravens DB coach in 2020. So then in 2021, Mike McDonald goes to Michigan. They were all there in Baltimore together. And Mike goes there, kills it in 2021, comes back to Baltimore, and is their defensive coordinator in 2022, 2023. Well, Jesse Minter goes to Michigan right after Mike McDonald comes back to the NFL and leaves that Michigan defensive coordinator position vacant, he goes and assumes that role. 2022, 2023, Michigan has the best defense in the nation pretty much the last 2 years, including this year where they gave up like 9.7 points a game or some crazy shit like that. So that's a name to look out for. Young guy, super talented. My guess, though, and this is why I don't think he'll be in the running here, is one, Michigan has a vacancy now that Jim Harbaugh has taken the job in LA with the Chargers. So he can be promoted to head coach, even though I think the offensive coordinator in Michigan is going to be the guy that gets the promotion, but we'll see. He was the guy that got the interim work when Harbaugh was suspended for 3 games. Minter got the start, got the interim tag for the first game of the season. Harbaugh was suspended for the first game, but then upon him getting suspended the second time for the 3 games, they gave it to the offensive coordinator. So I think the offensive coordinator would be the one to get it. In the event that the offensive coordinator gets the job and Minter feels some type of way, Jim Harbaugh could reach back to Michigan and say, hey, Jesse, I got a defensive coordinator spot waiting for you here in the NFL if you want it. If he's going to jump from Michigan to the NFL, don't you think it would be to go be with Harbaugh, right? That makes the most sense, right? So I can't see Jesse Minter being here, but I just threw his name in here because he's doing a hell of a job. And he came from Baltimore, so we know he's got some talent. Leslie Frazier, right? So we know about Leslie Frazier, been in the league. I mean, this dude has been an NFL lifer, similar to Rivera and Jack Del Rio. He's of a different era, but this is a dude that's been tied to the NFL forever. And unlike Del Rio, who was out of football for a while, and Ronald Rivera, who hasn't been a defensive coach or for over a decade, this man has been locked in the entire time. So he was a 5-year NFL pro. He started out his NFL career in terms of a defensive coordinator in Cincinnati under Marvin Lewis for 2 years in 03 and 04. Got another opportunity to be the DC of the Vikings under Brad Childress, 2007 to 2010. He was given the interim title of head coach in 2010 when they fired Brad Childress, and then given the job as head coach in Minnesota from 2011 to 2013. He went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2014 and 15, was their defensive coordinator there. And then he went to Buffalo in 2017 as their defensive coordinator and was their defensive coordinator until 2022, where he then retired for a year. Now he's made it known to all teams, all 32 teams, I want back in the league. I had my year off. I recharged my battery. I want back in. Let's talk about what he did in 2022, his final year as a defensive coordinator in the NFL before he went on a 1-year hiatus. So in 2022, the Buffalo Bills were ranked first in the NFL in total defense, okay? Number 1, numero uno. He only blitzed 19.4% of the time. That's good for 23rd in the NFL. So he's not a heavy blitzer, okay? Pass defense was rated 9th in the NFL. Rush defense was 4th in the NFL, and they gave up 17.9 points per game, good for 2nd best in the NFL. So this man was killing it, and we saw the drop-off that the Buffalo Bills defense took when he was no longer calling their plays this year, okay? The defense was now they had injuries, and they lost Tremaine Edmonds, and Tre'Davious White got hurt, and so there were a lot of things that they had to overcome, and Matt Milano got hurt, and so look, they weren't the same defense clearly, but Leslie Frazier, hell of a defensive coordinator, and has been pretty much his entire career. So that's a name to throw out there, and that's one of those dudes you can hire and not have to worry about him taking a job anywhere else. You hire Leslie Frazier, he might be your coordinator for the next 5-6 years, and you don't have to worry about anybody coming and poaching him from you. Denard Wilson is a name that has come up a lot lately. This is a guy that has been a career DB coach. He's been a DB's coach in this league for 9 years, 4 different times. Okay. So here's the thing: Jets, Eagles, and Ravens. He's been a DB coach in all stops, but particularly with the Jets and the Eagles, Jets in 17 and 18, Eagles in 2022, he was also tasked with being the defensive pass game coordinator. So that's interesting. He didn't get the job. A lot of Eagles fans were upset when the Eagles moved on or lost their defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, to the Arizona Cardinals as a head coach. And the assumption was that Denard Wilson would be promoted from defensive backs coach and pass game coordinator to defensive coordinator. Obviously, he got passed over for an outside guy in Sean Desai. The rest is history. Desai failed and has been fired from the Philadelphia Eagles. Denard Wilson went on to go to the Ravens to become their defensive backs coach. And now he's a sought-after commodity as a potential defensive coordinator candidate. Clearly, he's not going back to Philadelphia. Vic Fangio has already filled that void, but maybe he's a guy that could pique the interest of the Washington Commanders as their defensive coordinator. Just someone to keep in mind. Now, two more items on the shopping list. Now, John Fox, I got him listed, but here's why. Somebody brought him up probably like 2-3 weeks ago. I dismissed it. I'm like, yo, John Fox is, what is he, like 80 years old? How long has he been out of the game? Like, what are we talking about? But that person was like, well, hold on. Technically, he was a senior defensive consultant for the Colts in 2022, and he did the same thing last year for the Detroit Lions. That's the connection, right? He goes to Detroit, and he's their senior defensive consultant, and that's how he crossed paths with Ben Johnson. Now, I don't think, and we know John Fox from being the Panthers head coach, then the Broncos head coach, winning a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, or, he got fired the year before, I think. They won in 15, he got fired in 14. And then going on to be the Bears head coach. Then he was out of the league for like 7 years and then showed up as a senior defensive consultant for the Colts and now the Lions. That said, I don't think he would be here in a defensive coordinator position, but maybe, just maybe, he might be here in a similar position as a senior defensive consultant. You never know, right? Just saying, just throwing that out there. I don't see him being a coordinator, but I could see him being a senior defensive consultant. Anyway, the one guy that I see as a potential carryover, and now I said do not dismiss this, is Kelvin Shepard, currently the Detroit Linebackers inside linebacker coach. Now, Kelvin Shepard, 8-year NFL pro as a linebacker in this league. He then was given an opportunity to be the Lions outside linebackers coach in 2021. Now, if you recall, Ben Johnson got to Detroit in 2019. He wasn't actually given an offensive play calling responsibility, like pass game coordinator or anything like that, till 2021, which is the same time Kelvin Shepard got there. They've worked together for the last 3 years. Now, obviously, Shepard is on the opposite side of the ball. It doesn't matter. These guys know each other. They're in the staff meetings together. They know what's going on. And like I said, oftentimes when a defensive-minded head coach gets a job, he usually brings a guy from the offensive side of where he came from with him, or vice versa, right? So we'll see if that holds up here. But Shepard, to me, is the guy that makes the most sense from that staff, that may be respected. We've seen him do some really good work with some of the linebackers in Detroit. Maybe he's ready for an opportunity. Just thought I'd throw his name out there. We'll see. But anyway, I digress. Those are the names that I came up with on the defensive coordinator list. It'll be interesting to see what direction they decide to go in. Do not discount Dan Quinn if he does not get hired. I still think he's a very viable candidate in Seattle for their head coaching position. It's only Washington and Seattle left with a vacancy at this point. We'll talk more about that on the podcast tomorrow. We will go through all of those with a fine-tooth comb, all the hires that have been made. We started out with 8 hires. We're now down, or 8 openings and vacancies, rather. We're now down to just 2. Quinn is in the running technically for both, but I think more so in Seattle than here in Washington. But again, we'll see what happens. So don't discount Dan Quinn as a potential defensive coordinator hire here in Washington. I can tell you this, how I would feel about that is I love Dan Quinn as a defensive play caller. I love Dan Quinn and his style. I love his energy that he brings. I hate the fact that wherever he goes, he's going to make your team defensively smaller. They're going to be smaller. They're going to be more athletic. They're going to fly around, but they're going to produce turnovers, but they're also going to be able to be run on. That's what happened to Dallas. That's what happened in Atlanta. And that's what I think could ultimately happen to us if he were to come in and transform this defense. Now, in Dallas, they never had a Daron Payne or Jonathan Allen like we do. And so with those two in the middle, we may be able to hold up a little bit better than some of his other teams who didn't have those types of players in the middle of the defense. Still, if you got 205 and 210 and 215 pound linebackers running around, which is what they did in Dallas, you're going to get moved out of the way, period. They had dogs on that defensive line that could get in the backfield and stop the run. And the linebackers were still getting pushed out of the way. So I don't want any parts of that shit. Because there's nothing worse to me as a fan. I can't speak for you. For me and my fandom, over the years in my life of watching football, there's nothing worse than watching your team get gutted on the ground. It's the most excruciating way to lose a football game. And it's the most helpless, knowing there's nothing you can do about it. It's the worst. I'd prefer a quick, painless death like we saw this year with Washington versus the slow, painful death. That's torture. Getting run on. So Quinn's intriguing, but he scares me a bit. Anyway, I digress. So let's get to the comment section, see what you guys have to say. Shout out to Journey Reed for being a member for 22 months. We're getting close to that 2-year mark. Really appreciate you, Journey Reed. Thank you for the support. CGM87, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. CGM87 writes, Lou, Adam, and Josh need to take the anti-Viagra on Quinn interviews. 2 is plenty. Hard pass. He can run bleachers in his hat backwards in 31 other cities. Lateral from Ron at best. Jay Gruden of defense. We've all seen the shots of him in the press box, hat turned backwards, getting pumped up when his guys would make a play. And so he brings a lot of juice, man. He brings a lot of energy. There's no debating that. But if you're looking for a guy that's going to come in here and keep you rock solid, pause. You said Viagra, so I had to. You gave me the alley, right? I had to dunk that. But if you're looking to be stout at every position and at every level and be able to have your pass defense match your run defense or vice versa, he's not the man for the job. Because what he's going to do is he's going to come in, he's going to make this defense infinitely faster. We'll be one of the fastest defenses in football. He'll come in and transform it very quickly, like he did Dallas. They went from being historically bad in 2020 when he got the year before he got there, and then he went and turned them around into one of the best defenses in football in 2021. And it's not a coincidence that they went from, and remember, Mike McCarthy was the coach the year before. Don't forget, in 2020, when this division was horrid. Yes, Dak Prescott got hurt in 2020. We're all aware, but that doesn't mean the defense didn't have to, that didn't mean the defense had to go to shit. And it did. Because Dak got hurt in 2022. And what did they go? 4-1 without him? Whatever it was. So no excuses. Mike Nolan was awful. Old Tabasco sauce eye was awful. You bring in Dan Quinn the next year, and they go 12-5, 12-5, 12-5. And the defense had a huge part in that because the Dallas Cowboys are either at or near the top of the league in turnovers every single year that Dan Quinn was there. I think this might have been the first year they weren't first in the league. The Ravens were number one in takeaways this year. I bet you the Cowboys were somewhere second or third. Like, they're never that far away from first. So he's going to bring that to your defense. They're going to fly around. I love how he has the defense flying around. I don't want to be able to be run on. And again, not to say that it's automatically going to happen here. You go back to his days in Seattle, they didn't get run on like that. But that was a different time. That was a different group. And I think he's more with the way and like, that's a long time. You're talking about well over a decade ago. He was in Seattle with the Legion of Boom, right? We talking, 12 years ago, he was in Seattle. 12, 13, 11, 12 years ago. So much has changed in the NFL, and he changed with it, which is why he got smaller. So you can run with those tight ends. So you don't have trouble covering the back out of the backfield. But in doing that and trading that size for speed and quickness, you give up the ability to stand tall against the run. Different NFL now. Justin Evans, been a member for 2 months. What up, Jay? Justin writes, what's up, big dog? What's going on with you, man? Good to hear from you, as always. Welcome. My guy, Mr. Pink, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Mr. Pink writes, sup, LT, double E. What's going on, Mr. Pink? Says, Ben Johnson seems like a lock, in my opinion. Likewise. What's your honest opinion on Jaden Daniels, and would you prefer to take him at 2 or take the chance on a stud receiver to pair with Terry? So I said this on my video yesterday. I am going to start my quarterback process next week when there are no games. So what I'm going to do this weekend is one of the viewers sent me a link to a site that's supposed to have all 22 cut-ups. So I'm going to check that out and see if it's legit. If it is, then I should be able to have some access to some all 22s. And for the mob, we'll go through some of the film and, I'll cut up a few plays that stuck out to me that we can go over. But I'll have my breakdowns of these quarterbacks, the first 3 in particular, but I'll probably just go through all the quarterbacks. I'm going to start that the first week of February. So because I assume, and I probably shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming that on Monday or Tuesday, which are the 2 last days of January, on Monday or Tuesday, or is it 20? What's today? 25th, 26th is so 29th, 20, 30th, 31st, 29, 30. So the first 3 days of the week, one of those 3 days, Ben Johnson is getting hired. I'm assuming it's going to be Monday, the 29th. But in the event that it's not, it's Tuesday, the 30th. I don't see it being any later than the 30th on Tuesday. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about that. We're going to, do that whole song and dance and give that the attention that it deserves. Then I'm immediately, I told y'all I was going to do the GM and the head coach first. I wasn't going to do anything draft related until we got those 2 things out of the way, because those were the 2 most important hires of the offseason. Now that those are out of the way, I'll definitely be keeping close tabs on, Ben Johnson filling out his staff and all that stuff, seeing what they do to the guys that have been retained for the time being, like Eric Bieniemy. I expect all of those guys to be cleaned out, right? All of those dudes. He may retain, a few coaches here or there, but I expect them to pretty much clean house of all of these guys. But they're doing it the right way. They're going to allow Ben Johnson to come in here and assess the situation and see if there's any guys that or gals that deserve to stay here. So after that, I'm going head first into the quarterbacks. So once I do that, you'll know, because I'm coming out guns a-blazing, and once we go and we dive into the quarterbacks, we off and running, and we're not going to stop until the draft. So we just going to run through this thing. So be on the lookout for that next week sometime. Trevor Patch, been a member for 27 months. Why are we talking D coordinator? Defense doesn't exist in this league. Specials are more important. Long snapper, kicker, return man, revitalized Tress. Those things are important, just not more important than defense. While you say defense doesn't exist, it's not a coincidence that 2 out of the 4 teams left have been out, or excuse me, 3 out of the 4 teams left have been outstanding defensively this season. Not good, outstanding. The 49ers, the Chiefs, and the Ravens have been 3 of the best defenses in football this season. It's not a coincidence that they are the ones that are left. It's not on accident. So defense is alive and well. We'll see. Mr. Pink, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, poll answers, keep Tress, overhaul the O-line. So is Tress a free agent? I don't know what his contract situation is. But if he is a free agent, I wouldn't be opposed to looking elsewhere. Like, I'm not saying replace Tress, but if they found a younger kicker with a big leg, I wouldn't be opposed to it, But again, why create a hole on a roster that already has enough holes as is, right? So Tress probably doesn't want to go anywhere. He's comfortable here. We don't need to move on from Tress. If he's a free agent, I'm all for bringing him back. I don't know if he's a free agent or not. Trevor Patch, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, as I mentioned already. Greatly appreciate you. Trev writes, I'm convinced that if we want to go under center in a pass-happy league, we need a prototypical or bigger quarterback to see over the line more quickly than getting out of the tackle box and taking a 9-foot drop. May, Daniels, Milton. I want no parts of Joe Milton, right? But I think I remember I told you guys I want a taller quarterback. I'm a sucker for the taller quarterbacks. And I think both May and Daniels are pretty tall guys, so they both check off that box. I can't wait to watch, because I've been told by so many of you, watch this with May, or Daniels is this, that, and the third. I hear from Mel Kiper, and he's like, Drake May had some rough games at the end of the season and missing easy throws. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute now. Don't want to hear that. And he's like, Jaden Daniels was doing this, that, and the third. And you know how much stock I put in the SEC quarterbacks and performing at a high level in the best conference in the entire nation. So there's a lot to be said about that. So I'm anxious to get a look at it. I've heard nothing but good things about both of them as players, as leaders, as men. I saw an article the other day, not that this matters, but it doesn't hurt. Jaden Daniels was out helping feed the homeless on his birthday. So, I mean, and not that that matters. He could have been helping feed the homeless, a week after his birthday, a month after his birthday, a month before his birthday. It didn't matter the day, just the fact that he's doing that, right? That's great. And I heard that he's a really good leader. I heard he's one of those dudes that Whether you're winning or you're losing, you're up or you're down, he's kind of the same guy, similar to Sam Howell in terms of how he processes things. But I don't know if y'all been keeping tabs of some of the drama in Philadelphia, but one of the knocks right now on Jalen Hurts is stoic face. And I told y'all about stoic face, right? My favorite one, go watch that Bucks game if you have the capability. Go watch that playoff game against the Bucks, and you'll see a shot of tight end Dallas Goedert being extremely passionate. Like he was looking at the tablet and he gets up, and Hurts is sitting next to, I'm guessing it's the quarterback's coach. And, they were looking at the tablet together, and Hurts is just kind of staring off into space, like staring straight. And Goddard gets up and he says something back to Hurts, and Hurts just slowly just looks up at him like, almost to say, like, I know you ain't talking to me. And he looks up, and then he just goes back to looking at one of the worst things you can do to somebody is just egg the shit out of them, right? When I was a kid, if I really wanted to get back at somebody, I just would ignore them. I wouldn't talk to them. Because there's nothing worse than not having somebody that you really care about just not talking to you. That shit sucks. And if somebody's trying to have a real conversation with you, and they're they're passionate and they're giving off some energy, and you just look at them like they speaking a whole different language and then just look away. How does that make you feel as a teammate? You know what I'm saying? I've been hearing that there's been some concerns about that from some teammates. I don't know if it's true or not. I just love the drama in Philadelphia. I just love it. Anyway, I digress. Video channel. Been a member for 6 months. Who writes, first of all, thank you for being a member for 6 months. Who writes, I think the DC comes from outside the Lions organization, but JT Barrett is the OC or quarterback's coach. Could be great for the number 2 pick. Barrett will be a head coach in time. That was always a guy that people kind of earmarked as a player that would never make it in the NFL as an actual quarterback, but had all the intangibles and figured to be a coach one day. And so I wouldn't be shocked, I think Brunell is the Lions quarterback's coach. So, what I've heard is that Hank Fraley would be the guy that he would bring as his offensive coordinator, because the Lions aren't going to allow you to take Hank Fraley as their O-line coach. They're not gonna. They're gonna block you. So you got to give him a title upgrade, a promotion, in order to be able to snatch him away. So you'd have to make him your offensive coordinator. Now, would Hank Fraley want to do that? I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if he's going to bring anybody, outside the organization or whatever to be his quarterback's coach. He could say, you know what? Tavita Pritchard, you're fine. You stay as the quarterback's coach. I don't mind. Well, who knows? We don't know. We'll see. Eric, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Eric writes, any chance we get both Ben Johnson and McDonald? No. I think I've already addressed that. Too many people keep bringing that up. That is impossible. Here's the reason why, and it's a simple one. Ben Johnson is more likely than not going to be our head. Ben Johnson is going to be our head coach. Speaking that into existence. Mike McDonald is a future NFL head coach. He's currently the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. If we do not give him an upgrade in title, then he is not, the Ravens aren't going to give us permission to talk to him, interview him, nothing. They can block us. But even if they gave us permission to talk, do you really think Mike McDonald is leaving Baltimore? What good would it do for him to come to Washington? What would that prove? He's already a hot candidate. He's not going to get a job this year potentially. And that sucks, because had he been able to interview face to face, he probably would have gotten a job. And that's the part that kind of sucks when your team has this deep run, right? Unless the team's willing to wait on you, it's tough. Because there are other candidates that are open to interview that can wow these teams and they make a decision. But that said, if I'm Mike McDonald and I got all these pieces here and I'm already comfortable and I've been in the Ravens organization for the last 7 out of 8 years or whatever it's been, I'm not leaving the Ravens to go to Washington for what? I'll just stay in Baltimore one more year, kill it again, and then I'll get a head coaching gig. So no, one, the Ravens aren't going to give you permission to talk to him. And two, if I'm Mike McDonald, what sense would it make for me to leave Baltimore? It's not like Eric Bieniemy where he wasn't getting any of the credit for being the offensive coordinator. He's getting all the credit because he is the defensive coordinator in Baltimore. So no, it's not happening. Jay Sauer, 1990. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Jay Sauer, 1990 writes, we need to get something set up with Gabe Taylor. He's been playing great, and he said that he wants to come here. I don't know who that is. Sounds like a big defensive tackle. But whatever the case may be, we'll see what happens once they decide to start filling out the roster. We'll find out. We'll see what happens. You can want to go wherever you want to go. If that team doesn't want you, doesn't matter. And oh, is that Sean Taylor's brother? That's who is Gabe Taylor, Sean Taylor's brother. That may be who that is. Doesn't matter where he wants to go. He doesn't get to pick unless he goes undrafted, right? So it really doesn't matter because you're not going to pick him in the first round. Probably not going to pick him in the second round. I don't know what his body of work and his talent suggests where he should go, but if it's meant to be, it'll be. Rolando Cedeno, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, hey, Louie T, how are you? I'm doing pretty good, Rolando. Thanks for asking. What about yourself? I have a feeling Ben Johnson is over leveraging his position. He better come down from that $15 million a year salary. Quinn is well respected by Adams and should have won a Super Bowl if not for Shanahan. I don't know if the $15 million salary is accurate or not. Nobody actually vetted that. I don't think that's true. Yeah, I don't see that being the number, and I can't see that. And you know what's been interesting is we haven't really been getting coaching totals ever since the Panthers amount of money they were paying. Oh, shucks. What's my man from Baylor? It came from Baylor. Why am I blanking on his name? Matt Rule. Ever since we found out how much Matt Rule was getting paid, which was $8 million, which was the most of any coach in the NFL at the time. Once we found that out, we really haven't been hearing about how much coaches are making. We just find out how long the deal is. I wonder if the NFL made it abundantly clear to all of the league insiders and people who cover the league, don't disclose coaches' income and annual salaries. Like Harbaugh just got a big deal, I would assume. All we found out was it's a 5-year deal. Every time a player signs a contract, the first thing we get is how much the contract's worth. With all these coaches, we just find out how many years it is. We never find out the money anymore. So I don't think it's going to be $15 million, and I don't know if we're ever going to find out how much the contract is. You know, I mean, if you do enough digging and probing, you might be able to find out. But they don't announce that stuff anymore. They don't make it common knowledge like they used to. So I don't think he's over leveraging, but we'll see. You know, and Dan Quinn, again, very respected head coach, as you mentioned. Very respected defensive coordinator, which is why he was interviewed so many times around the league. That Green Bay game didn't do him any favors. I'm not gonna lie to you. That might have hurt his stock a bit. However, if you like Dan Quinn and you like him as a coach, you're gonna hire him. That game isn't going to change your mind one way or the other. I just think from a philosophical approach standpoint and how he likes his players, and I just think he's made the adjust to all the speed and athleticism on the offensive side, but there's still an element of physicality that must exist in this NFL. Teams are going to run the football on you if you're light in the pants, and his defenses are light in the pants. So I don't know. We'll see. Rolando Cedeno, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes? Also, my prediction, if Harrison Jr. isn't available at number 2, that Adams will drop back. That Adams will drop back. You mean Adam will drop back and acquire picks for this year and next. The team has too many holes to choose a quarterback at 2. They will roll with Howe. Rolando, sorry to burst your bubble, buddy, but there's no way in hell they're passing on quarterback. All they have to do is like one of these dudes, not named Caleb Williams, at the top of this draft, and they're going to take him. Because, again, this is the mindset. This is what you always got to take into consideration as a fan. And this is why I begged the Falcons to take Justin Fields instead of Kyle Pitts. But they didn't listen to me, and now look at where they are. And now, look, they may have to trade for Justin Fields just to get him on their team. And they would love to have Justin Fields. Raheem Morris would love to have Justin Fields in Atlanta. You'd never expect to be that high in the draft again. Nobody ever goes into a season saying, hey, we're going to suck this year. We're going to end up with the top 5 pick. Nobody ever says that. Nobody ever wants that to be the case. You never want to draft that high unless you got the pick from somebody else, i.e. Chicago getting it from Carolina this year. You never want to be drafting that high because that means you suck. And nobody ever wants to suck that bad. Hence, you don't expect nor anticipate being this high again to be able to be in a position to draft a quarterback. So because you're this high, you have to take the quarterback. You just have to. Unless it was a draft like 2022 where there were no quarterbacks that tickled your fancy this high, then you'd be in a position where you could say, there's no quarterbacks here. We're not taking a quarterback. We'll take something else or we'll trade back. That's not the case in this draft. This is a quarterback-rich draft class. All right, there are 3 quarterbacks that have separated themselves from the rest of the pack. One of those 3 is going to end up here in Washington. So, Rolando, sorry to burst your bubble. We're taking a quarterback at 2. Because the expectation of Adam Peters and Ben Johnson and the rest of the organization is that we're not going to be in this position again. Because we're not going to be this bad again. No matter who the hell the quarterback is. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB who writes, Solu, a rookie quarterback, limited spending in free agency because of new regime. With that being said, and the roster that is going to be left, what is your projected win total? I got to see. That's an impossible thing to ask me right now. I mean, just from what I think is ultimately going to occur and what rebuilds normally look like, somewhere between 5 to 7 wins would be my guess. Like, I'm being realistic. That number could be upped after free agency, coupled with the draft, and feeling really good about. But it won't. I can assure you this: I won't be talking that 11, 12 win shit this year. I won't be doing that. This will be more like the Ryan Fitzpatrick year, except I won't be down on the offense because Ryan Fitzpatrick is authoring it. I'll be excited to see what it looks like with Ben Johnson as the play caller and this rookie quarterback. That said, I'm expecting to go through the growing pains, just like I told y'all with Sam Howell. It's not always going to be beautiful. It's not always going to be rosebuds and, miles and miles of candy and blue skies. It's going to be some bumpy roads. It's going to be some days where it's going to be storming outside and you're like, oh, that was gross. That's a part of the process. I'm expecting that. So I wouldn't say there will be limited spending in free agency either. I think they won't spend on a bunch of big high-priced items. Not to say that they won't spend on 1 or 2, but there'll be a lot more, shorter deals, 1-2 year deals as they turn this roster over. But that doesn't mean they won't spend a lot. Just means they're not going to be spending it on high-ticket priced items. That's it. Jado, been a member for 3 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, what up, Lou? Prediction of when Ben will be hired. My guess is Monday, right? Monday the 29th, no later than Tuesday the 30th is my guess. They're going to try to get this done as soon as possible. If the Lions lose, it'll make it that much easier to get it done. If they win and he still got Super Bowl obligations, it'll still get done, but you still got to wait for all, the press conference and all of the pleasantries and everything. You still don't really have him because he still got an obligation to the Detroit Lions to try to go win a Super Bowl. Should they lose on Sunday, I think he's signed, sealed, delivered by Tuesday. Like, the news is out Monday. By Wednesday, we're having a press conference, and he's being introduced as the new head coach of the Washington Commanders. That's the timeline I see. This will be wrapped up. If the Lions get eliminated on Sunday, this will be wrapped up by the end of January. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, and truthfully, I wouldn't bring any players back from the defense that are free agents. And on the offense, Gates and Wile Coyote both need to be cut. I think we could find a Samuel in the draft. Well, you could find a Curtis Samuel in the draft. Will you is the question. It'll be interesting because if they don't bring him back, I'm not going to be upset or hurt or anything. Like I told you, I'm open-minded. What they decide to do, I'm with it. This group hasn't won anything as constructed. So they're going to take a wrecking ball to this thing. So they could be looking for another Curtis Samuel. They could be looking for a big, tall receiver to give them a different, variety. Who knows? We'll see. Defensively, I would be open to bringing back Kendall Fuller. Again, as somebody stated earlier in the comment section of the video I did yesterday, depending on the scheme, he'd be a good fit. If it's man-to-man, he might not be a great fit for that any longer. But because of his smarts, I think he could make a seamless transition to safety. Remember, he did play safety for the Kansas City Chiefs in that Super Bowl season. So there's no doubt in my mind he can make a seamless transition to safety if need be. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. But again, it's not a necessity, as I mentioned. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Chris, thank you so much for your generosity. As always, really, truly do appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the fam. Likewise. Hope all is well in your neck of the woods. Really, truly do appreciate you. Who writes, 2 questions. 1, what 2 positions would you address in the second round of the draft if the right players are available? O-line, tight end, edge, and cornerback. Why? And how much time do you think Tepper will give before firing Canales, and why? So I think I've stated this before, but if everything happens according to plan, I'd go right to the trenches in the second round and get an offensive lineman and an edge rusher and with those 2 picks in the second round. Now, I'm not forcing it on any position because what I want is the most talented players at every position because we need everything. There's not a single thing I'm turning down at this point, including receiver, running back, everything that you think we have some of already. Give me more, right? So I'm not turning down nothing. Get the most talent at every position known to mankind. That said, if the conditions are ripe for you to take a tackle in the second round, please, by all means, grab one. I want the big athletic tight end from Texas, Jatavian Sanders. Love to have him. I think you're going to probably have to spend a second round pick to get him. That said, I would like to think that there'll be more options in the draft at tight end. And if you don't get one in the second, we got 2 third-round picks. You'll be able to get one then, right? But I want the most talent. And if there isn't a tackle that matches the talent and the upside of a Jatavian Sanders, I want the tight end. Right? I'm not forcing tackle because we need offensive line help. If the value in the third round is greater than the value in the second round at the offensive line positions, then spend the third round pick on the offensive line. But we need an edge rusher. Again, I would love to find one in the second round. If it's not there, go to the corner. If corner's not there, go to linebacker. Like, we need everything. I want the best of the best of the best of the best of the best. All right? Because throw need out the window. We need everything. Okay? Just assume we need everything. So throw need out the window at this point. Talent, 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 talent. That's what it's about. The best of the best, grab it. Preferably O-line, D-line. All right? Offensive line, tackle preferably, defensive end. That's how I would go. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Greatly appreciate you as always, my guy. Chris, thank you for your generosity. Can't thank you enough. Double up. Thank you for doubling up and blessing those in need with a membership. Joe Rockhead, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Joe Rockhead, writes, my list, Marquand Manuel, DB coach of the Jets, Bobby Babich, linebacker coach of the Bills, Ben Bloom, D-line coach of the Browns, and Chris Kurik, D-line coach of the 49ers. Check them out. And again, it's a lot of dudes that's been waiting their time. I know Marquand Manuel has been waiting a long time to be a DB, be a defensive coordinator. And so that's a name that definitely rings a bell. Bobby Babich is a name that also I've heard before. The rest of these names, though, are new names on me, so I definitely will check them out and see what they've been up to, what their resume looks like, and how they're viewed in league circles. J Sauer 1990. Stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB. Oh, let me go back to my guy Chris's comment. He had 2 questions, not one. The second question was on Tepper and how long would Canales get in Carolina. That is a great question. You know what? I'm gonna bring this up tomorrow, and I was saving this for tomorrow. But since you brought it up now, I'm gonna go ahead and address it. You know what this feels like? Because everything he does, I just equated to Snyder. Because we lived it, right? We went through this. Him hiring Dave Canales feels like us hiring Jay Gruden. He wasn't going to get any real talent. Not that Dave Canales isn't talented. I think he did a wonderful job with Baker Mayfield. A wonderful job. Baker Mayfield set career highs across the board. Let me ask you something, though. That was the first year he had done it. Secondly, who else interviewed Dave Canales? Who else interviewed him? Who else was about to hire Dave Canales? No one. Okay. Nobody was going to hire Dave Canales. He was going to be in Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield again next year. What did Carolina do? They hired a guy that wasn't going to get a job anywhere else. But because they couldn't get any of the top tier talent, they settled for a guy that did a really good job. Does that sound familiar? Nobody else was hiring Jay Gruden. He was a hot name because he was doing some good things with Andy Dalton. But nobody else was hiring Jay Gruden. We didn't have a choice, though. Nobody else was taking this job. So you get the smart young coach that's done a really good job with the guy that maybe overachieving, and you hope he can do it for your guy. We had just drafted Robert Griffin III, second overall, and he struggled in 2013. So what did they go get Jay Gruden to do? To fix Robert Griffin III, right? What did the Panthers just do? Bryce Young coming off of a disastrous rookie season. So what do? They go get a guy that remade and reshaped a former #1 overall pick in Baker Mayfield and revived his career. Maybe he can do the same thing for our guy. Tepper is bringing him in there for the sole purpose, just like Dan Snyder did at the beginning. Sole purpose was to rebuild Robert Griffin III, make him a viable starting quarterback again. And Jay said, yeah, I can do that. And then after 1 year of fooling around with Robert, was like, I can't do this shit. And luckily, he had Scott McCloughan to back him up when he wanted to get Kirk in there. David Tepper ain't going for that shit. Dave Canales' job is to come in there and make their former #1 overall pick, Bryce Young, comfortable. Build an offense around him that will allow him to succeed. And if that shit doesn't happen, I would guess if Bryce Young doesn't work in the next 2 years, Dave Canales is fired. He's fired. So I'm going to give him 2 years. Jay Sauer, 1990. Been a member for 25 months. So you came back like cook crack, been a member for 25 months. Salutes to you, man. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Who writes, what if the Lions win? When can Ben be hired? He can still be hired. It's just we won't be able to go through the ceremony, right? We won't be able to bring him out to Washington to sit him down, meet with the press, formally introduce him. That won't take place until after. Remember when the Cardinals hired the Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon last year? We already knew he was hired in Arizona, but they still couldn't introduce him and all of that good stuff until after the Super Bowl. So that's same thing we had with Eric Bieniemy. We couldn't hire Eric Bieniemy, bring him here, introduce him to the media and the fans and all of that stuff till after the Super Bowl was over. So all you're doing is prolonging the process of him, officially putting ink to paper, having to, roll the 3 Super Bowl trophies out. If they're going to still do that, I don't know if this group will do it or not, and bringing him on board, right? But it'll be a done deal. Officially, Washington does it. It'll just be official once they've been eliminated, right? Because then you can fly him out here, get his family here, similar to what we did with Adam Peters, get his family here, get them here, have a press conference, start that process. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass writes, the John Fox thing was me. I knew it was somebody, couldn't remember who. And I remember kind of swatting it away, get it out of here. But then we actually had dialogue because people were like, hey, he wasn't out of football. He came back. I was like, he's not going to be a defensive coordinator. He says, and I really like Michael Pratt out of Tulane, the quarterback. Again, trust me when I tell y'all this. They are not going to go and get some. Now, Michael Pratt could be a guy that they like as a backup quarterback. And Adam Peters was in San Francisco, and they drafted quarterbacks in back-to-back years, right? Trey Lance, and then the next year they drafted Brock Purdy. So that's not foreign to them. However, I don't see him drafting a quarterback while Sam Howell is already on the roster, another quarterback. Because that would force you to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster when you're trying to build this thing. You want as many roster spots available to you as possible. So the likelihood is you draft 1 quarterback at 2. You got Sam Howell on a rookie deal that is friendly for the next 2 years, and maybe you get an undrafted quarterback. I'm pretty sure they're going to bring an undrafted quarterback in here to compete and probably be on the practice squad. Maybe you draft one in the 7th round. I always think that that's a good practice to have anyway, is to draft a late round quarterback that you develop just for safekeeping. That's what they did in San Francisco. So I think I wouldn't be shocked if they did that here. I just don't see it happening in year one. Knowing that Sam Howell would then be a free agency after 2024 or 25, you draft one next year in the draft that can then take Sam's spot on the roster once he becomes a free agent if you don't want him back. That's what they were doing with Brock Purdy. They didn't draft him to be the starter. They drafted him because they knew Jimmy Garoppolo was about to exit stage left. They needed another quarterback. They were going to lose C.J. Beathard in free agency, or they had already lost C.J. Beathard in free agency, so they knew they were going to need to have a guy, so they drafted Brock Purdy. They didn't know he would turn into what he turned into. 1-6 Devil Doc, been a member for 29 months. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Lustradamus. That's me. I can't remember when you first mentioned Ben Johnson, but I think it was late October, early November. You called your shot, Lou. You the man. Also, I think we need to avoid Caleb Williams. So let me just say this. I made that video so that I could make everyone, not just Commanders fans, that's a video for every fan of every team out there, anybody that doesn't know everything about Caleb Williams and all the things that have gone on. I was doing that video because, again, it's called QB Conundrum, to talk about why it might be a tough decision for someone to pull the trigger on him. But his talent suggests it'd be hard not to. I did not do that video as a way to tear him down or to, and I think I did a pretty good job of coming at it from both sides of the coin, both ends of the spectrum, if you will, and saying, hey, if you want to look at it this way, you can. If you want to look at it this way, you can, right? You can go both ways. You can see his dad as being a caring father that just wants the best for his son, or you can just see him as a meddling father, right? Like, it's up to you, for you to decide. You know, all this stuff is subjective. The dude is talented. He cares. There's some questions as to how he goes about doing things, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line is that option probably won't even be in Washington's hands. If the Bears see fit to draft Caleb Williams, which I think they're ultimately going to do, the only way they don't draft him is if he tells them pre-draft process, I won't play for your organization. I think that's why the Bears have played this thing down the middle the way that they have, is because they got to protect themselves in the event that they show up at the combine, they finally get to meet with this kid for the first time, they start talking to him, and he's like, I'm going to be honest with you, not even interested in coming to Chicago. Don't like the weather. Don't like the organization and what it's represented the last 20 years. I don't want any parts of that. I don't want to play for your team. And if that's the feeling they get, the vibe they get, or if that's what his handlers or his agent tells them, whatever, and they realize, like, nobody wants to hold anyone hostage. The days of doing that are over. Like, if you don't want to play for my franchise, fine. I'll find someone who does. So that's the only way he gets to Washington. The likelihood is, and he's said before, I'll play anywhere. If that's the case, I think he ends up a Chicago Bear. So you probably don't even have to worry about wanting him. I don't think he's going to end up here, but we'll see. Mike Jane, thank you for being a member of the MOBB for 15 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, what's up, Big Lou? You a fan of Kingsbury or Kellen Moore? Me either. Nah, I'm not a fan of either one of them. I'm a hard pass on both of those dudes. I know Cliff Kingsbury, for me, his offense is one of those offenses, much like Chip Kelly, belongs in college football. The air raid belongs in college football. I want no parts of it in the NFL. As far as Kellen Moore is concerned, Kellen Moore has shown the ability to draw up good plays, to score points. I just don't want another play caller who isn't interested in running the football. The reason they got rid of him in Dallas is because he didn't run the ball enough. I'm not interested in going with another play caller who doesn't value running the football. You just had one that didn't give a damn about running unless his quarterback was running. Why would you want to do that again? I know I damn sure don't. That's part of the reason that I love Ben Johnson is because he's going to run that bitch. He's going to line up and he's going to run that bitch. Shit out of luck. Been a member for 7 months. I wonder if that's who I think it is. I'm not sure. But he says, Cherry Squad. In the building, you know what it is. Shout out to the Cherry Squad. If you're not over on shucks. Where's my phone? If you're not over on it would not, I would not have a notification from it right now on my phone. I would not have it. This would be the time. I normally got 50 notifications from the damn app. Now I need it and I don't have it. Jeez Louise. You got to be kidding me. Such is life. That is just that is perfect. Discord, that's what it's called. Discord. If you're not on Discord with the Cherry Squad, you're missing out. It's some good stuff, and I've learned how to navigate it a little bit. I'm still somewhat ignorant, but I know how to do enough to be dangerous up there. And they do a great job of keeping you informed, whether it's Rico or it's Ed or it's Tim or it's myself or any Washington content creator you could think of. They keep you informed of when they upload a video, they tweet, whatever. All of that stuff is so informative, impactful. So not just a place for you to chop it up with other fellow Commanders fans. Even if you're not a fan, I'm pretty sure you can still get in there and chop it up if you'd like. But they keep you abreast of everything Washington Commanders. So, and then they talk about other shit too. So I check it out if you get an opportunity. Cherry Squad, stand up. We in the building. Y'all know what it is. So that's going to do it for moi, your man Louie T here on Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I appreciate y'all kicking it with the kid. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow. Right now, that'll be in podcast form. I'm going to put out a video for y'all tomorrow to digest as well, more likely than not. Hopefully, I'll get to it. If not, I'm definitely going to do a podcast tomorrow because we have to preview Championship Sunday. But definitely doing a pod, not only to do that, but also to go over the coaching moves that have been made. So we started with 8 vacancies. We're down to 2. Our team is one of the 2. I know y'all saw the reports that they're not going to announce anything until Sunday after the championship game. That tells you all you need to know. Why are you waiting until after the championship game on Sunday? Duh, because the guy that you're hiring is coaching and you don't want any distractions. So Ben Johnson is coming to Washington. The question is, who's he bringing with him? We'll see. Anyway, I digress. You guys get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you next time. I should be dropping something for y'all tomorrow morning. If not, I'll drop it over the weekend, more likely than not on Saturday. Either way, you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.